The first thing I noticed was how quiet the house was. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind of quiet that settles over a home on a cold December morning when everyone is still asleep. This was a different kind of quiet. The kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you stand very still in the hallway, listening for something you already know isn't there. I stood at the top of the stairs in my robe and slippers, and I listened. No television murmuring from the back bedroom. No footsteps. No voices. My son's shoes were gone from the mat by the front door. My daughter-in-law's coat was not on the hook where she always left it. I walked down the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail, and I already knew before I reached the bottom. I already knew before I checked the garage and found her SUV gone. I already knew before I walked back to the kitchen and found the note on the counter, folded in half, leaning against the fruit bowl like a parking ticket. It was Christmas Eve. I had been planning Christmas dinner for 3 weeks. I had the standing rib roast already marinating in the refrigerator. I had wrapped presents for both of them and stacked them under the tree my son had helped me drag in from the yard 2 Sundays ago. I had called my sister in Phoenix and told her I wouldn't be making the drive this year because my son wanted to spend the holiday at home. With me. I unfolded the note. It said they had gotten a last-minute deal on a resort in Cancun. 7 nights, all inclusive. My daughter-in-law had always wanted to go. They didn't want to wake me. They hoped I'd understand. They'd call when they landed. "Merry Christmas, Dad." That was it. 12 sentences. After 63 years of living. After raising that boy on my own from the time he was 9 years old. After letting them move into my house 18 months ago because they said they needed to get back on their feet. 12 sentences on a folded piece of paper, next to a bowl of oranges. I set the note back down on the counter. I stood there for a moment. Then I opened the refrigerator and looked at the roast. 7 pounds of prime beef I had driven 40 minutes to pick up from the butcher on the other side of town because my son had mentioned once, in passing, that he'd always loved standing rib roast for Christmas. I closed the refrigerator door. I did not cry. I went upstairs, got dressed, and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop, and I started making some phone calls. Let me back up. My son is 34 years old. He is a good-looking young man. Charming in the way that some people are charming effortlessly, almost accidentally, in a way that makes you feel warm in their presence without ever being quite sure what they actually did to make you feel that way. I loved him from the moment I first held him, and I loved him through every difficult year after his mother left, and I loved him through his 20s, when he couldn't seem to hold a job for more than 8 months at a stretch, and I loved him when he married my daughter-in-law 4 years ago. A woman who had opinions about everything and warmth for almost nothing. She is not a bad person. I want to be fair. She is simply a person who views the world as a series of resources to be evaluated and either used or discarded. I recognized it early. I said nothing. That was probably my first mistake. They had been living in an apartment across town, but last spring my son called me and said they were having a hard time. The rent had gone up. He'd been laid off from his sales job. My daughter-in-law's hours at her clinic had been cut. Could they stay with me for a few months? Just until they stabilized. The house was big, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a yard, a garage. I was rattling around in it alone. Of course they could stay. Within 6 weeks, they had taken over the master bedroom. I had moved to the smaller bedroom at the end of the hall without quite understanding how that had happened. My daughter-in-law had rearranged my kitchen. My son had started driving my truck most days because, he explained, the mileage on his car was getting high. I did not complain about any of this. I told myself this was what family did. You made room. You adjusted. I am a retired building contractor. I ran my own company for 31 years. I know how to read a site plan, how to manage a crew, how to spot a foundation problem before anyone else sees it. What I am apparently not very good at is recognizing when someone is doing to my life what a sloppy subcontractor does to a job site, cutting corners, borrowing materials, quietly running up costs that someone else will eventually have to pay. I have 3 rental properties in addition to the house I live in, a duplex on Carver Street, a single family on the east side of town, and a small commercial unit that has been leased to the same insurance office for 11 years. Every month, the rent payments come in. I have managed all of it myself. Same system, same spreadsheet, for decades. But in the spring, when my son moved in, he had started helping me. He said he was good with numbers. He said it would give him something to do while he looked for work. He set up an online portal. He said it was easier than paper checks. I trusted him. I should not have trusted him. In November, about a month before that Christmas Eve morning, I had gotten a letter from my accountant flagging some irregularities. Transfers I didn't recognize. A pattern of small withdrawals from the property management account that individually seemed like maintenance expenses but collectively amounted to something that made my accountant uncomfortable enough to pick up the phone and call me directly, instead of just noting it in the quarterly report. I had spent 3 weeks going through the records quietly. I had not confronted my son. I wanted to understand the full picture before I said anything. I am old enough and have run enough jobs to know that you do not stop a pour before you've measured the whole slab. By the morning of December 23rd, I knew the full picture. Over 14 months, my son had transferred a total of $61,000 out of the property management account into a joint account that he shared with my daughter-in-law. He had done it in increments small enough not to trigger automatic flags. He had forged 2 of my signatures on maintenance authorization forms that he had never shown me. He had used the account to pay for things that had nothing to do with the property's furniture, a vacation to Nashville, a home gym set that was currently sitting in my garage, restaurant charges, clothing, $61,000. I sat with that number for 3 days. I did not sleep particularly well. I went through the rest of the records. I looked at the lease renewal he had supposedly sent to my Carver Street tenants. I found it had never been sent. I looked at the commercial unit maintenance log. 2 repairs had been billed to my account for work. I could find no evidence had ever been done. I had not yet decided what to do. I was still deciding on the morning of December 24th when I came downstairs and found the note. Something settled in me when I read that note. I cannot explain it precisely. It was not rage. Rage is hot and imprecise, and it makes you do things you regret. What I felt was colder than that, and much, much calmer. It was the feeling I used to get when I was standing on a job site and I realized the whole thing needed to come down and be rebuilt from scratch. Not anger, just clarity. I went upstairs. I got dressed. I sat at my desk. The first call I made was to my attorney. His name is a man I have known for 22 years, since he handled the incorporation of my contracting company. He answered on the second ring, which surprised me. And then I remembered it was Christmas Eve and he was probably awake early with his grandchildren. I apologized for the timing. He told me not to be ridiculous. I told him what I had found. There was a long pause on his line. And then he said, "Tell me everything." I told him everything. By noon on Christmas Eve, he had sent me 3 documents to sign electronically. The first was a formal demand letter to my son for the repayment of the transferred funds, with documentation of each transaction. The second was a notification of termination of my son's informal property management role, effective immediately, with revocation of his access to all related accounts and portals. The third was the beginning of an amendment to my estate documents. I signed all 3. Then I called a locksmith. My house has 4 exterior locks. By 2 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve, all 4 had been rekeyed. I had a new set of keys. The old ones my son's copy, my daughter-in-law's copy. The spare that hung on the hook in the kitchen were useless. Then I called each of my tenants personally. I introduced myself as if we were meeting fresh, which in some ways we were, and I explained that there had been a change in management and that all future rent should be directed to me personally at a new contact number. The Carver Street tenants were relieved they had questions about a repair request they said had been ignored for 2 months. I wrote it down. The commercial tenant had been trying to reach someone about a roof drainage issue since October. I wrote that down too. Then I called my bank. I removed my son's secondary access from every account he was listed on. I changed the login credentials for the property management portal. I notified the bank's fraud department about the unauthorized transfers and opened a formal documentation file, as my attorney had advised, in case we needed it later. I did all of this between 7 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. Then I put the standing rib roast in the oven, opened a bottle of wine I had been saving, and called my sister in Phoenix. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was doing fine. I told her the roast smelled incredible. I told her I would explain everything in the new year. She said, "Raymond, what happened?" I said, "Merry Christmas, Patricia." She laughed, which was the right response. And we talked for an hour and a half about nothing important. And by the time I got off the phone, the roast was done, and the house smelled like garlic and rosemary, and something that had been a long time coming. I sat at my dining room table alone, and I ate Christmas dinner. It was the best meal I had eaten in months. My son called on the 26th. I let it go to voicemail. My daughter-in-law texted me a photograph of them on a beach somewhere. Her in sunglasses, both of them smiling. She added a small Christmas tree emoji. I did not respond. They called again on the 27th, 3 times. I let it go. On the 28th, my son texted, "Dad, is everything okay? We're a little worried. Please call back." I did not call back. On the 29th, my daughter-in-law called from a different number. I recognized the area code as the resort, or close to it. I let that go too. On the 30th, my son texted again, and the tone had changed. "Dad, I'm getting an alert that my access to the bank portal has been revoked. Can you call me? I think there might have been an error." I read that message. I set the phone down. I went out to the garage and spent 2 hours going through their things, not touching anything, just cataloging, making a mental list. The home gym, 4 boxes of her clothes, his golf clubs, 2 bicycles, a flat-screen television they had brought with them, a dog crate, though they had never gotten the dog, all of it sitting in my garage like a storage unit they had built inside my home. On New Year's Eve, they flew back into town. I know this because my son called me from the airport. I answered that one. "Dad." He sounded relieved. "Finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. I thought something happened to you." "Nothing happened to me," I said. "Why didn't you call back? Why is my access revoked on the accounts? My key isn't working. I think there's something wrong with the lock." "There's nothing wrong with the lock," I said. "The locks were rekeyed." Silence. "I don't understand," he said. "Yes, you do," I said. Another silence. Longer this time. "Dad, I've been going through the accounts," I said. "All of them. My attorney has been going through them too. We have documentation of every transfer, every forged signature, every billing entry for work that was never done." I heard him breathe. I heard some background noise, an airport announcement, the sound of a rolling suitcase. My daughter-in-law saying something quietly in the background. "Dad, I can explain. You'll have the opportunity to do that," I said. "My attorney will be in touch with you next week. He has sent a formal demand letter to your email address, which I would encourage you to read carefully. If you have questions about anything in it, you should speak to your own attorney before you respond." "Are you serious right now? It's New Year's Eve." "You're welcome to stay in a hotel tonight," I said. "I'd suggest calling ahead. It's a holiday weekend." "You're locking me out of the house? That's my home." "No," I said. "It's my home. It was always my home. You were a guest in it." He started to say something else. I said, "Happy New Year," and I ended the call. I sat in the living room for a long time after that. The tree was still up. The presents I had wrapped for them were still under it, because I had not yet decided what to do with them. A bottle of wine I had opened sat on the side table. Outside the window, the street was quiet, the way streets are quiet on New Year's Eve in the couple of hours before midnight, when everyone is somewhere else and the neighborhood belongs entirely to the people who stayed home. I thought about my son at 9 years old, the way he used to fall asleep on the couch watching television, and I would carry him to bed. And he was getting heavy by then, but I never minded. I thought about his mother leaving, and the way he had stood in the kitchen doorway the morning after, and asked me if she was coming back, and I had told him the truth, and he had nodded like a small man and said okay. He had been such a tough little kid. I wondered when that had changed. I wondered if it had happened gradually, or if there was a specific moment I could have caught if I had been paying better attention. I did not come up with an answer. I'm not sure there is one. I did not feel triumphant sitting there. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired and a little sad, and mostly just clear-headed in a way I had not felt in 18 months, as if something that had been pressing against the back of my eyes had finally been removed. My son called back 40 minutes later. His voice was different. The defensiveness was gone, replaced by something that was trying to sound like contrition, but kept sliding toward desperation. "Dad, please, just let us come talk to you. Just let us in the house. We can work this out." "Not tonight," I said. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not something I can solve for you." "Dad, it's New Year's Eve. We just got off a plane." "I know," I said. "You were in Cancun. 7 nights, all inclusive." He went quiet. "I have the charge," I said. $4,800. December 23rd through December 30th. You used the property management card, the one I gave you access to for approved maintenance expenses. More silence. "You left me a note," I said, "next to the fruit bowl." It was Christmas Eve. He said my name very quietly. "I would like you to talk to your own attorney before we speak again," I said. "Not because I want to punish you, because this is going to be a legal process now, and you need someone in your corner who knows what they're doing. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" He said yes. "Good," I said. I ended the call. They found a hotel. I don't know which one. I did not ask. January was a busy month. My attorney and my son's attorney exchanged paperwork. There were conversations I was not part of and do not need to detail here. What matters is what was decided. My son agreed to a repayment schedule for the full amount, $61,000, plus the cost of 2 contractors I had to hire to verify and redo the maintenance work that had been billed but never completed. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the forged signatures. My attorney thought I was being lenient. He may be right. He does not have a son. There were conditions to the agreement. My son and my daughter-in-law were required to vacate the house within 30 days. They are now in a rental apartment on the north side of town. I have no opinion about the north side of town. My estate documents were amended. My son remains in my will, but the terms are different now. The rental properties, which I had previously intended to transfer to him outright, are now held in a trust with an independent trustee, a professional, not a family member, who will manage them and distribute income according to terms I have set. He will benefit from them eventually. He will not control them. That is a distinction I should have drawn a long time ago. I also started going back to the properties myself. The Carver Street duplex needed a new water heater and some work on the back porch that my tenants had been asking about since September. I did the porch myself over 3 Saturdays in January. I am 63 years old and I am not as fast as I used to be, but I know how to swing a hammer, and there is something that happens to me when I am working with my hands that does not happen any other way. Something straightens out. Something that has been bent comes back to level. The commercial tenant on the east side, the insurance office, sent me a card in February, a handwritten note from the woman who owns the office, thanking me for finally addressing the roof drainage issue. She said the previous management had been unresponsive for months. She said she had been thinking about looking for a different space, but now she would stay. She signed it with her first name and a small drawing of a son. I put it on my refrigerator. My son calls occasionally. We speak. The conversations are careful and short, and there is a layer of something between us now that I do not know if time will dissolve. I hope it does. I am not a man who enjoys estrangement, but I am also not a man who will pretend that things are fine when they are not, or look away from a problem because looking at it is uncomfortable. I did that for 18 months. I know what it costs. My daughter-in-law does not call. I did not expect her to. My sister came out from Phoenix in March and stayed for a week. We ate at the kitchen table every night and talked until late, the way we used to when we were young and our parents were still alive and the house was full of people. She asked me once, carefully, if I was lonely. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, "I'm quieter than I was. That's not the same as lonely." She gave me a look that said she wasn't entirely convinced. That's fair. She knows me better than most. But here is what I know, sitting in this house now. This house I have owned for 26 years, with the keys I changed on Christmas Eve still on the hook by the door. I know who lives here. I know what belongs here, and what doesn't. I know the value of what I built. Not because I've put a number on it, but because I have spent 31 years understanding that the things you build with your hands and your time are the things that last. My son called me last week. It was a Sunday. He said he wanted to know if he could come by sometime, just to talk. Not about the money or the attorneys, just to sit down together. I said I would think about it. I am still thinking, but I want you to understand something. The $61,000 matters. The forged signatures matter. The Christmas Eve note matters. All of it matters, and none of it will be forgotten. And my attorney has copies of everything in a file that will exist long after this conversation is over. And at the same time, he is my son. He is the boy I carried to bed when he got too heavy, and I carried him anyway. He is the kid who stood in the kitchen doorway the morning after the worst thing that had happened to us and nodded like a small man and said, "Okay." That boy is still in there somewhere. I have to believe that. But belief is not the same as trust. And love is not the same as access. I run this house. I run these properties. I run my own life. I built all of it from nothing. And I know how to build it again if I have to. And I know how to protect it now that I understand what I was failing to protect before. On the hook by my front door, there is one set of keys. They're mine.